So an email came in a couple of days ago from Aria. Hi, Aria. And in this email she says, please, can you help me in understanding on how she managed to let go? It's not that simple for me. And so I thought this would be a lovely opportunity to kind of make a video blog and reflect on that. And so this is for you, Aria, and I'm talking directly to you. But I thought it might also be interesting for anybody else that it might be useful for. So I thought we could share it in this way, and that it would give me a chance to make a video as well, because I really like making videos and communicating this way. So I hope you're really good, Aria, and thank you so much for your message. It's really kind of you to get in touch. If anybody else, if you do ever have any questions or anything like that, then do just get in touch. And like I say, while I'm not the most kind of email-y person, then maybe it gives us an opportunity to make a video or a podcast or something. And just on that note, if you are watching, click the subscribe button down below, and then you can kind of stay in the loop with things, or leave a comment so that I know what you've made of this video, or just send some love or something like that. It's just good to connect with you. But just reflecting on your question, Aria, can you help me in understanding on how she managed to let go? It's not that simple for me. So this is obviously a reference to the poem She Let Go, which is by the Reverend Sapphire Rose. It's not my poem. And I came across this poem quite a number of months back now, and I usually share a poem at the beginning of my meditation classes and on retreats and things as well. And I just shared it with the class that night, and it struck me how powerful it was. There's a video of it on YouTube, and there's a reading of it on Insight Timer, and it's in a few other places too. And I'm really blessed in that part of my sort of writing work is kind of reading things aloud to people from stages. In fact, in a few weeks' time, I've got quite a lot of this work coming up with its literary festival season here in the UK, and I'm at a couple of festivals, so I get a chance to kind of share lovely things with people from the stage. And yeah, so I can't answer on Sapphire's behalf, of course, because I'm not her. It might be really interesting. I might get in touch with her, because we've had a little bit of email contact, and maybe discuss that with her. Maybe we can do it in a way that we can share with you or something. But let me explore that first, because yeah. But I can give you my reflections on the poem a little bit, and also reflect on this question a little bit. The reason I like the poem so much is that it's about not asking for permission, and it's about not, making a date in your day timer or putting a note on the calendar that today I'm going to sort of, self-realize. It's not about, if you do this number of things, then you can let go and kind of become free in your life. If you do the right yoga, if you, right, you're not telling all your friends, right, on Saturday, I'm going to become a fully enlightened being. And then really going for it, because this is one of the modern problems that we have with interpreting the spiritual, is that a paradigm seems to have been passed down to us, that it's achievement based, that maybe if we're good enough, if we heal enough, if we are kind enough, if we do the right yoga course, if we learn the right mantras, if, I don't know, all these things, then, once we've done those, then we'll arrive at a place. As if the kind of, the conditioned person, the little me, can somehow add this thing to them and become something greater. And then perhaps that little me is somehow kind of cut off, and this magical other life begins. So in a lot of ways, the answer's in the question. Can you help me in understanding on how she managed to let go? It's not that simple for me. If you notice the stresses in that sentence, there's the word me twice. And this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the word me at all. It doesn't mean that that somehow you have to kind of find a way to kind of chop that, and that we're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean that at all. It's just that me can't do it. The I, the small I, well, there's nothing to actually achieve. Or it's not an achievement that we're trying to make. What it is, and this is only language that I'm using, and language never gets it right, because language is dualistic, and so no matter what I say, it's only ever a pointing to something, and the pointing I give may resonate for you and it may not, and then tomorrow I might say it in another way and it might resonate more or it might resonate less. So everything is like a famous thing of the finger pointing to the moon, but we spend a lot of time kind of, well, whose finger is it, and kind of why is it pointing, and kind of looking at the finger and, what's the health of this finger like, and maybe I should do more yoga on my finger. You see, and so we try to make the finger the best finger and all that sort of thing, which is a good thing to do. It's a good thing to look after your body, but the finger is not the moon, and the thing we're talking about is not the person trying, but that person who's trying, that idea that's come into the person. Well, that's coming from somewhere. That's your movement that desires freedom, that desires love, that wants to know the truth of things, and that has to be coming from like the highest part of yourself, and kind of reflected into, the personal world. And so I would say just stay with that higher part of yourself in a way. It's interesting that that the more that we try, sometimes kind of the further away things become. And isn't it funny, every time this is something about the spiritual life that is true, is that every time you sit to meditate, I don't know if you can hear the siren in the distance, every time we sit to meditate, or every time we try to kind of allow the peace, then a siren or a garbage truck turns up, or the phone rings. Isn't that funny? And it just seems to be the case. I think maybe Mara, the world, really isn't keen on us finding out that this is not actually all that there is. And yet it's very interesting and useful, this siren, because if you can hear it, then you can actually hear that the siren, as annoying as it is, if we choose to go with the annoying bit, then we're annoyed. But we can actually hear kind of like the silence behind it as well, and the spaces in it. And as we do that, we actually feel the space in ourselves. And the same is true with everything, you know, through all of our senses, is that the senses come into the body, and yet we meet them in a place before interpretation, before the mind. So we can actually see our mind working, we can see our emotions working, we can see things coming in, light into the eyes, feeling of our clothes against our skin, and so on. And there's just a kind of pure experience that's kind of recognized by consciousness. And then the mind says, oh yeah, this t-shirt's not quite right, or that sound's annoying me. And then that's that, and we react to that if we choose to. If there's space, we might choose to respond rather than react. And really, that's kind of that's the way to go. I think it's that that as we meet ourselves more and more in that kind of true space that's inside, there's more kind of space in the world, so that we don't have to get annoyed by the siren, or that the person who says the same thing to us at work every day, we kind of, oh no, it's that person again, that we actually just almost kind of meet the silence inside that person, not trying to change them, but so that we're not in reaction to them, you know. Yeah, in that we kind of hold space for everything, or that we are space for everything, and everything is just kind of doing whatever it's doing, and it's the interpretation that we place on it that makes it whatever it is. And yet I find, as I sit here sort of in space with you, Arya, I find that if I was to name how that feels as best I can, so sirens, and then somebody knocking on the door. So what was I saying? As I sit here and I'm just aware, and it's not the me that's aware, but just the space, I just realize that I'm space, life, talking to you, because there are words and we can move in life, you know. I can teach my class tonight, I'm talking to you now. It's almost like that space or that light kind of illuminates the mind and is illuminating the emotions. If I say how it feels in some way, which is a very poor translation, but I find that as I hold space with you, there's what we might call compassion, there's benevolence, there's just basic love of human love. And that's not attached or directed or created. It just is naturally what's here. And I think you do yoga, don't you? And so you must be aware of kind of like the feeling of life in you, you know. And if you just notice that feeling of life in you, then you kind of notice that you're noticing it. if that makes any kind of sense. It may not make much sense to the head, but something in you notices the feeling of life in your body, notices the senses operating, notices what you're doing, right now, notices what inputs are coming in. And in that noticing, there's a kind of spaciousness. Well, I would always ask, well, who is actually noticing? It can't be another part of the mind. If we just keep almost asking that question, who is noticing? Who is experiencing this? Well, my mind is working, so I notice that my mind is working. So if I can notice the mind, then I'm not just that. That's a lovely tool that I have to use. But I have choices and space, whereas sometimes if I get very involved in perhaps like what we might call object consciousness, that we get very attached to a thing, then there's a lot less space, and we might believe kind of what's going on in the head, the kind of the voices in the head sort of thing. And yet, at this moment anyway, I'm aware of the thoughts going on. Maybe you can reflect on that in yourself. I'm aware of my noticing of that. I'm aware of the feeling of life in me. So who is aware of the feeling of life? And there seems to be a spaciousness that comes before even that. And perhaps that's what it is that I'm trying to kind of point to. That's it's not the animating principle of life, but the animating principle of life almost kind of is a doorway into the spaciousness that we really are, and that everything arises from that spaciousness. So that's not a letting go, but I mean, you could call this an inquiry process, a process of just noticing. And then what I found in my own practice is that as I've learnt to rest there, not the me resting there, but as I've kind of come to live from that place, I've begun kind of noticing what it is that kind of takes me out, what kind of makes me into the small me again, and deliberately looking for that, deliberately looking out in the world of kind of what kind of reduces me down, particular reactions to people, not looking after my health if I don't look after my health, not having a self-caring and a self-loving relationship with myself. And at times where I do lose myself to kind of object consciousness and becoming more fixed in things, I find that the way back tends to be entering back into kind of love and actually just saying what's going on to myself with very radical honesty, not getting caught in kind of shaming and blaming of myself. Oh no, I've lost it, therefore I'm a terrible person, all this spiritual stuff is nonsense, blah blah blah. No, just noticing, perhaps noticing that I am caught up. Oh, I'm caught up with this thing. And the second you say I'm caught up with this thing, then you're not caught up with it anymore. You're not in ego anymore. You're back in consciousness, but there may be still some traces of the kind of, ripples kind of going on. But you're back in awareness, and there's nothing much for you to do then but just kind of just stay there for a while, and it will kind of ebb away. What I did find in my own life is that there was an awful lot of suffering, and that patterns kept repeating themselves. I kept like having the same relationship over and over again with different people, but the same relationship. And I noticed that I was addicted to a very particular kind of strong feeling, and thinking that strong feelings were life. And that's what life was for, to feel strongly about things, and to kind of build oneself up egoically. And to say, you know, I am this, I'm a writer, I am this, I've achieved that. But I noticed that I could notice them. I noticed that I noticed these things, and I started noticing particularly the pattern of suffering. And I said to myself, okay, there's definitely more to who I am than this. And I noticed that part of me wanted to just get rid of the suffering, to push it away. But something in me said, well, let's just meet it. Let's just say hello to it. Let's just see if there's a message to be had. Not that I am due this suffering because I've been a bad person or something like that, but just, what's it really trying to tell me? And as I did that, I found that there was more space. And just keeping this up each day allowed not for a kind of letting go, but for a movement to a kind of more transparent way of living, where the spaciousness, the light in me, the more light that I kind of came out, the more light there was, because trust kind of started to grow that actually this was the foundation of life. I didn't keep kind of snapping back into the kind of the little me. And so I'm not saying that this is a way for anybody else, but you know, if I was to suggest a path to anybody, and this is just my way, I would say meeting your life with true love is a really good first step, you know, and that can be quite a physical and practical thing, not based on other people's values, however, but based on what is actually true, as far as we can tell, as at the time that we're living, which seems to just let more light out, not more light in, because we already are. So that might be just, excuse me, drinking enough water every day, juicing, food choices, turning up on your yoga mat, spending time in nature. I particularly noticed that the green of nature really kind of cleanses the heart. Not reacting to other people, but holding space for ourselves, being aware of healthy boundaries. I don't know, maybe, you know, it's for you to reflect on kind of what works for you. But the goal, see, terrible word. The destination, if not more spacious and more conscious and more original and more uncreated, if not, then perhaps is not worth pursuing. Or perhaps those are the signs of truth. And the poem kind of ends. I'll put a link to the poem below this if you've not heard it. And for those listening, I know Aria, you've heard it. But for those others listening, if you haven't heard it, it ends with a line saying, like a leaf falling from a tree, and the sun shone. And that's kind of what it seems to be like as we become open more, transparent more, let go of the little me more, and live from the space that we are. The world around us, it's not that there's anything wrong with that world at all. You know, we still have a human body, and we can still kind of go out and do everything. But we find that we see the space in everything else, and the perfection in everything else. And so we start to see the beauty and the bliss in everything. And so our experience becomes blissful in our being. It's like, what's is it a Sanskrit or a Hindi word? You know, Satchitananda, bliss, consciousness and being. Which doesn't mean that you're necessarily laughing all the time either. You might, you know, something very sad may happen and you find yourself moved to great tears by it. And yet those will be very true tears, and there'll be space within that, in the truth of that sadness. You know, it's not about an eternally kind of happy thing, although it is always happy, blissful. There's a blissness. Yeah, okay, we'll have that blissness to things. Yeah. I don't know if that helps, because, you know, if I give this to the mind wants to give you an answer. Here, this is what it means. This is how you do it. I wish that something I found most helpful is kind of sitting together with others in meditation. You know, I love my classes, I love my retreats, and just to sit in the spirit of truth with others is the most supportive thing. It's almost like other people's movements towards truth sort of supports our own, because we're all that space, we're all that life. And so I would encourage anybody to sit with others, if there are others available. If there's not, then, you know, every Wednesday evening that I'm in the UK and I'm at home, I teach a class, I guide a class. I'd say more than teach. I don't like the word teacher. I don't think of myself as a kind of guru or teacher type or anything like that. I'm just holding space as best as I can. And then it's down to each of us to realise life for themselves. And anything that arises in you because of us holding space together, that was already in you anyway, you know. And it's a blessing for me to have kind of been witness and part of that. But yeah, so, you know, every Wednesday evening at 7:15 and 8:15, the class that I work with meditates for 20-25 minutes at a time, and we have a cup of tea in the middle. So through the timer app, Insight Timer, and on my kind of social media pages and things, some weeks I just say, you know, the class is sitting this evening, sit with us if you want. And as things have grown, you know, I know that there are people around the world kind of sitting at the same time, to have that kind of feeling of sitting with others, even though they might be in Australia or Ohio, you know, or Spain. And because we are all actually sitting at the same time, because the time on the clock is a set of agreements as to kind of what time it was, that kind of, as a kind of practical manifestation of how things work in a kind of material way. But we are actually all in the same time at the same time. So I invite you to sit with us if you have no one else to sit with. But if you just let that be, then maybe maybe you already do sit with other people. And that's beautiful, I can't think of anything more enjoyable actually than sitting in truth with others. And I just pray that in time, as things continue to grow, that maybe I can come and maybe lead a little retreat where you are, or be part of something where you are, so that we can sit together, really, so that we can be spaced together. It's not a terrible ambition, is it? Hey, so yeah. Yeah, so I don't have a big life-changing answer, apart from, as I said before, it's not me that does it. It's not the me that does it. It's that you already are, and the effort of trying to make it happen isn't going to do that, as far as I can tell. But if we do wish to make some kind of effort towards our healing, then it's towards loving ourselves that we should perhaps maybe pay attention, and to let that be really, really genuine, and not worry too much about, am I letting go, am I not letting go, am I being enlightened, am I not being enlightened, but just that simple, even just let go of the idea of letting go, and just keep returning to space. Not spacing out, but returning to being in reality, to being fully present, to being really here, to seeing the tree outside the window and meeting that tree before the word tree appears in your mind, and then noticing the word tree appear in your mind, and noticing the action of the mind and the action of the emotions, but noticing that you notice. And so it goes, So, yeah, let's stop there. Because otherwise I'll just go in a loop, and yeah, and that'll be that, won't it? So, but I really enjoyed this, talking to you through this, and if anybody else is listening and you have any questions, then it all has the same answer. It all has the same answer, which is just keep coming back to the space and the life inside, really. But if you do have anything, then put it in the comments below, or pop me an email, or get in touch through the Authentic Living site, and yeah, and hopefully we'll sit together soon. Blessings to you. Take care. Bye bye.